Governor, thanks for being with us. Back in 2008, you became governor of New York State unexpectedly. And one moment of great pride was when you stood before a joint session of the Assembly and State Senate and proclaimed, "My name is David Paterson, and I am governor of the state of New York." Looking back, are you still filled with pride about assuming that job?
Absolutely. The most exciting thing that happened to me in my life, something that I never expected, and a challenge, difficult, acrimonious at times, always a struggle, but being there for the most difficult economic crisis in the state's history was an honor, and I just hope that the management spares us from further economic problems down the road.
You said that anybody who was in charge of reducing state spending as much as you have would in the end perhaps be unpopular.
25 of the 37 governors who were up for re-election this year did not run. So 2 out of 3 governors eschewed the opportunity to engage the public trying to win another term. That's astounding. And it just goes to show that with 48 of the 50 states in deficit, very few were able to grapple with the economic problems and maintain political leverage. So when I look at the country in its entirety, I realize that perhaps my role was to come in and refocus the state on diminished spending, closing the budget gap, and maintaining a certain amount of austerity. For while it may not have been particularly helpful to me if I had wanted to stay, was an enormous undertaking and one that had to be done. And now that it is, the governor-elect, Andrew Cuomo, hopefully now can finish the reduction part of the equation and help to move us into recovery, which I think he will.
You say you're proud to be governor. Did you ever have a desire to be governor prior to being catapulted into this position?
I don't think I had a strong desire to be governor. And that's what made this so exciting. If it hadn't happened the way it did, I would not have learned a lot about executive service and administrative service, and it even took me a while to catch on to it. But I realized that someone has to be the adult in the room. Somebody has to veto bills that create unfunded mandates, and I vetoed $1.7 billion of spending that would be part of this deficit crisis otherwise. And so I think that it was probably not only exciting, but it was educational.
Very early on, you decided to come forward and talk about less than stellar moments in your own past. That being drug use, some problems in your marriage. You said at the time that you wanted to get the information out because you feared that others would put it out. Is that something that you regret doing? Did it weaken your position early on?
It might not have been the right time so quickly after taking office, but I did want to save the vetting process by disclosing anything that would have been interesting about me. Polls showed that 82% of people could care less about what was going on in my marriage, and 90% of the people polled could care less about somebody may have tried drugs when they were a young person. So I never saw it as inhibiting. What it did do, though, was ignite a sort of feeding frenzy in the media that I wasn't expecting that claimed almost anyone that knew me.
As we move along during the term, the next low point came when Senator Hillary Clinton was named by President Obama to be Secretary of State, opening up her seat in the Senate. There was a lot of discussion about the job going to Caroline Kennedy. You took your time in making an appointment to that position and eventually went with somebody else. The appointment itself perhaps didn't draw as much controversy as leaks that were made at the time regarding the reasons Caroline Kennedy was not selected, or perhaps didn't want to take the job. You said that you should have taken steps to discipline members of your staff who leaked that information. What was your own opinion when you saw these stories begin to pop up?
Well, Caroline Kennedy was grossly mistreated in that process, and it is highly regrettable. All she did was hold herself out as a potential candidate for the Senate, and it was horrible the way she was treated. One thing about that process that I don't think is remembered is, unlike President Obama, who resigned from the Senate right before he became president and was replaced immediately, and Vice President Biden, who resigned from the Senate as a senator from Delaware and was replaced immediately, Senator Hillary Clinton did not resign until she was confirmed as a cabinet member by Congress. And so, therefore, had I made an appointment sooner, it was not clear that Senator Clinton would serve as yet. Anything can happen. Senator Daschle didn't get through confirmation hearings. There was all this talk around about Senator Clinton perhaps having a problem, and then also some that believed that Senator Clinton really didn't want the job and might change her mind. In retrospect, I would have taken the chance and ended the circus earlier, because I couldn't get anyone to listen to me about anything other than the Senate selection process. If you remember, during that time, Bill, I put the New York State budget out 5 weeks early with an aim to pass the budget on March 1st rather than April 1st, which would have saved us $900 million. That would have been a big story. When I did the press conference on December 16th and announced my budget plans, I didn't get one question about the budget. It was all about the Senate.
Mm-hmm. Very, very late in your term this year came the whole issue of an investigation, first sparked by the New York Times doing a story, which led in turn to a number of stories speculating about what the New York Times story might say, and a number of rumors making their way around the Capitol. When the New York Times came to you, did you have any inkling of what they were looking into? And when you found out what they were looking into, what was your reaction?
Well, my reaction is that for 2 weeks there were unsourced rumors, innuendos, and outright lies. At the kickoff of the Super Bowl, 3 different media outlets were contacted to be told that I would resign in a major scandal the next morning. And I thought in these situations that these were all made-up stories designed to harm me, and that the media was not investigating these sources, whoever they were, if there were any sources at all, because when they started speculating about what the Times was going to write about, there were no sources, but the articles were made to look as if they were real, and that hurt me. Obviously, if you sling enough mud, you'll hurt the character of any person, and I thought it was highly regrettable. What I think is even more preposterous is that when I object to it, I'm described as whining. I'd like to see any of the people who wrote those articles have their lives smeared in such similar fashion and see if they could be as silent as they would choose to have me to be.
In the end, the Times article dealt with an episode involving David Johnson, who was an aide to you, and touched on the issue of you making a phone call to a woman that Mr. Johnson was later accused of having been violent with. Was it a mistake for you to speak to the woman?
No. First of all, I didn't call the woman. The woman called me, and you can read that in the K report. And you can also read that the woman didn't call me related to a problem with David Johnson. She called me in relation to a problem with something else. And I reported her misgivings about treatment to the New York Times, or they would have never even known that I spoke to her.
Should you have terminated Mr. Johnson from his position as soon as this story, you became aware of this report?
No, I think classically what's done in these situations is to suspend the employee because there weren't even any charges lodged against him, and that's what we did.
There's still an ongoing investigation into allegations regarding tickets to a Yankees game. At this point, have you spoken to anyone, been subpoenaed, face any type of activity once you leave office in regard to that investigation?
I won't comment on that. If it is ongoing, then the correct procedure is not to talk about it.
There was a point in time, again, when people very close to you were looking at the political landscape and saying David Paterson is preparing to run for a full term as governor. And every time he seems to be gaining ground, something becomes public that knocks him back. And all of the fingers began to point the way of Andrew Cuomo and his staff.
I think he's just as much a victim as I am. I thought that the mishandling of information by the media brought my situation to where it was, even now being misreported. And so to then go and blame another person because, and who is a friend of mine, by the way, who wants to run for governor, I think is outrageous. He didn't have any involvement in this, and pointing fingers at him would be just as bad as pointing fingers at me.
In terms of Mr. Cuomo, though, in the past, that you've said that you felt he was too political. Is that, again, a view that you've now resolved in your own mind, or do you, because obviously you're saying now he's going to be a great governor?
Well, first of all, I never said he was too political.
You felt you would have made a better governor.
Well, I don't think you should be running for governor unless you think you'd make a better governor. And you do have situations where people think they have a better plan than you do and they want to run against you. That's part of the way politics works, and it's actually good for the democracy. So, I didn't have any problem with that. Obviously, if we'd been opponents, which we never wound up being, we might have had different points of view about things, but I don't think he nor I have ever let it get in the way of profound respect we have for each other and a friendship we have with each other.
Let me just wrap up this part of the questioning with this, which I've heard from a few people. When they go back to the initial information that you put out about yourself, they say the governor indicated that he felt there was a rogue unit within the state police that was perhaps going to peddle this information. When the information about Caroline Kennedy surfaced, the blame fell on your staff. When the information about Mr. Johnson and that whole matter came to light, the attention was then focused on the media. How much blame do you share in all of that?
Well, I didn't authorize the leaks on Caroline Kennedy, and I didn't, and I put the story out myself about my issues, and the other issues that you just mentioned turned out to be bogus, and that's not what I said. That's what the K Commission said. So I think there are mistakes I've made as governor, and one of them was not appointing the senators sooner. But any kind of allegation that I'm finding a reason for everything other than me, first of all, I never said there was a rogue unit of the police department that was going to put the story out on me.
Moving on to the new governor coming in, you've obviously held a number of talks with him in the past few weeks as the transition has gone on. You've said that it should be a seamless transition. When the two of you talk about the political landscape that he'll face in Albany, much the same as you faced, with the problems of deficits just mounting and mounting and mounting, how does he get past the roadblock which you've hit in the legislature? How do you finally overcome the inability to get some of these deep cuts made in order to get that deficit under control?
Well, first of all, the legislature did cut $42 billion over the last 3 years. It may not have been as much as I would have wanted them to. They didn't close the deficit around this time last year, but that's pretty significant savings. In fact, 3 times as much over an analogous three-year period in the history of the state. Where I think Governor Cuomo is going to have a great advantage is that he campaigned in this vernacular. He let everyone know what he's going to have to do. He made it clear that we're going to have to tighten our belts. And as a result of it, received an overwhelming mandate when he received 62% of the vote on election night. His victory was so strong, he may have swept other people into office with him. So when he gets there in January, there will be no confusion about what he's trying to accomplish. I believe there was some confusion about what I was trying to accomplish, because what I was asking the state to do was almost counterintuitive to what I would have advocated for as a legislator, which I had only been 2 years before. And I think that perhaps some looked askance at why I was doing this, because I don't think anyone believed there was an economic crisis when I went on television to announce that we would see the worst recession since the Great Depression on July 30th, 2008. So I think that what Governor Cuomo will have when he gets to Albany in January is a legislature that totally understands what he's trying to accomplish, that is pledged to work with him, and realizes, as Speaker Silver said the other week, that there's going to have to be some belt tightening. So I would hope for the best.